Have you ever felt stuck at the end of something, like coming to the last chapter of a book you don't want to finish? I know that feeling of emptiness that comes when something important comes to an end. It's as if there's suddenly no ground to stand on and the next steps seem impossible. We've all been there, looking at something that has ended, a relationship, a job, a dream, and feeling as if a part of us has been lost too. I remember how difficult it is to accept that certain doors are closing. That restlessness that arises when we realize that a cycle has come to an end, that natural resistance that makes us want to hold on tightly to what is already leaving. It's almost instinctive, isn't it? We cling to the familiar because it gives us security, even when it no longer serves us. As human beings, we put down deep roots in our habits, our routines, and our histories. And when any of this is threatened, our first impulse is to resist. Perhaps today you are facing one of these moments. Perhaps a job has come to an end, a relationship has fizzled out, a path that seemed right has suddenly disappeared. Or maybe it's something smaller, but just as important. A project that failed, an expectation that didn't materialize, a change you didn't choose. I know it hurts. I know that the pain sometimes seems endless, as if the ground had disappeared and you were in free fall. I've noticed how often in everyday conversations we avoid talking about these endings. At family gatherings, among friends, even on social media, we share achievements, celebrate beginnings, but rarely talk about things that have ended. It's as if there's a silent agreement to keep goodbyes a secret, as if admitting an end was admitting defeat. And so we go on, silently carrying the weight of the cycles that have ended. Have you ever noticed how we almost always talk about endings with heavy words? We say, we lost a job, a relationship ended, a dream was destroyed. Our language reflects how we see these situations, as losses, as defeats, as something that has been taken away from us. And the heavier the words we use, the harder it is to see beyond them. It's as if every ending carries with it a sentence: this far, no further. I know how suffocating it can be when all you can see is what has ended. It's like being in a dark room where all the windows seem closed. Your thoughts run in circles. Why did this happen to me? What if I had done it differently? How do I move on now? These questions echo inside you without finding answers, and each day seems to carry the same weight, the same feeling of being stuck in a moment that won't pass. The interesting thing about endings is that they rarely come suddenly, even when they seem like surprises. If you look closely, there are usually little signs along the way: that persistent discomfort at work, those conversations that have become more difficult in relationships, that dream that no longer brings the same sparkle to your eyes. But our mind specializes in ignoring what it doesn't want to see, doesn't it? And so, when the end finally comes, it seems like a bolt from the blue. Sometimes the hardest part isn't even the end itself, but what comes after it, the emptiness. Those afternoon hours that were once filled with work, now empty. Those Sundays that were once spent with someone special, now lonely. That energy that was once directed towards a goal, now directionless. It is in this empty space that fear finds its perfect place to grow, bringing with it anxiety about the future and doubt about our ability to move forward. Perhaps you're wondering how to overcome this, how to turn this weight into something lighter, how to find meaning again. It's okay not to have all the answers right now. It's okay to feel what you're feeling. It's part of the process. You know, in ancient traditions, there have always been rites of passage, ceremonies to mark endings and honor transitions. Somehow, our modern world has lost many of these rituals, and with them, we've also lost valuable tools for processing our losses. Have you ever noticed how children deal with change? They cry, they express their frustration openly, but soon afterwards they are able to take an interest in something new. Not that it's that simple for us adults with our complex lives and responsibilities, but there is something to be learned from this childlike ability to feel fully and then move on. There's a natural wisdom in this that we often forget as we grow up. What I'm about to share with you is not a magic formula. There are no exact steps that work for everyone in every situation. But there is an invitation to look at endings with different eyes. To realize that maybe, just maybe, what seems like an insurmountable wall could actually be a door we haven't yet learned to open. It's an invitation to explore how a simple change of perspective can completely transform your experience. Because as far as I can see, every end carries within it, like a seed, the potential for a new beginning. Have you ever watched the sun go down? That moment when the day ends, the colors spread across the sky, and everything seems to come to an end. But that same sunset that marks the end of a day here is rising on the other side of the world, starting someone's day. It's exactly the same light, just seen from different places. What is the end for some is the beginning for others. It all depends on where you're looking. Our lives are full of these moments of transition, these sunsets that can be seen as endings or beginnings. Think about how we say goodbye at the end of a conversation. In Portuguese we say adeus, a contraction of adeus, a surrender, an end. But in Italian they say arrivederci, until we see each other again. In English, goodbye comes from God be with you. May God be with you on the way. These are goodbyes that already carry within them the seed of reunion, of the journey that continues. When a tree loses its leaves in autumn, it seems to be dying. In fact, something is ending the cycle of spring and summer. The leaves fall, the branches become bare, and the tree seems to go into a kind of mourning. But what we're seeing is only part of the story. Underneath that apparent death, the tree is preparing itself. It's concentrating its energy in its roots, protecting itself to survive the winter, saving resources so that it can bloom again when spring comes. What looks like the end is actually preparation. It's curious how we react when something comes to an end in our lives. We often focus all our energy on looking back, on what we've lost, on what no longer exists. It's as if we were driving a car looking only through the rearview mirror. We feel the loss, the absence, the emptiness, and we rarely ask ourselves, where can this energy that was invested in what has ended now be directed? What space has this ending opened up in my life? Think of the process of learning to ride a bike. At first, there are support wheels, that extra security that allows the child to get used to balance and movement. There comes a day when the wheels need to be removed. It's the end of guaranteed safety, the end of a learning phase. At that moment, many children cry, are afraid, resist. But it is precisely the end of this phase that allows another to begin, the freedom, the speed, the independence of riding on two wheels. A farmer understands this dance between endings and beginnings well. When he harvests a crop, it's the end of a cycle. Months of labor, care, and expectation come to an end with the harvest. But that same farmer knows that in order for there to be a new harvest, there has to be an end. They have to clear the land, prepare the soil again, start from scratch. Without the end of one harvest, there could be no beginning of another. Endings aren't just inevitable, they're necessary. We often resist endings because they make us feel like we've lost control. When something ends, especially if it wasn't of our choosing, we feel as if life is happening to us and not because of our decisions. It's an uncomfortable feeling of powerlessness. But what's hidden behind this feeling is the opportunity to discover what kind of power we really have, not the power to control what ends, but the power to choose how we respond to these endings. I've seen how we often identify so much with our roles that when they end, we feel as if a part of us has died. I'm a doctor, I'm a wife, I'm an athlete. When these roles come to an end through retirement, divorce, injury, the painful question arises, who am I now? It's as if the end of a role means the end of our identity. But perhaps it is precisely in the spaces between one role and another that we discover who we really are, beyond titles and functions. There is an ancient Japanese technique called kintsugi, the art of repairing broken ceramics using gold in the cracks. Instead of hiding the damage, this art celebrates the history of the object, making the breaks part of the beauty of the piece. When something breaks, when a cycle comes to an end, kintsugi reminds us that we don't have to pretend there was no break. We can acknowledge the breaks, honor them, and even find beauty in them, not in spite of them, but through them. Have you ever noticed how some of the greatest discoveries have come from apparent failures? Fleming discovered penicillin when his bacterial cultures were contaminated by mold. What seemed like the end of his experiment turned out to be the beginning of a medical revolution. When Columbus arrived in the Americas, it was the end of his attempt to find a route to India, but the beginning of a new era. Endings are rarely just endings, they are portals, they are detours that take us down paths we never imagined existed. There's a story about an old Chinese farmer whose horse ran away. His neighbors came to express their condolences for his misfortune, and he only replied, "Maybe." The next day, the horse returned with 7 wild horses. The neighbors congratulated him on his luck, And he just said, maybe. His son tried to tame one of the wild horses, fell and broke his leg. Again the neighbors lamented their misfortune, and again the old man replied, perhaps. The following week, army officers came to the village to recruit young men, but because of his broken leg, the farmer's son wasn't taken. What luck, the neighbors exclaimed. Maybe, replied the old man. When we come to the end of something important in our lives, a job, a relationship, a cycle, it's as if we're standing on a doorstep. On one side, the known that is ending. On the other, the unknown that is to come. It's natural to be afraid, to resist. It's natural to want to return to the comfort of what we know, even if it no longer serves us. But maybe, just maybe, that threshold isn't just the end of a room. Maybe it's the entrance to a much larger space, much more in line with who we are becoming. There is a revelatory moment that happens when we finally accept an end, not with resignation, but with true acceptance. It's like opening the curtains in a dark room. At first, the light may hurt your eyes, but soon you begin to see what was previously hidden in the shadows. Acceptance is not giving up. It's recognizing reality as it is without the distortions of desire or fear. It's saying, that's over, without immediately adding, but it shouldn't have been, or what if it had been different? Perhaps the secret is not to rush into naming experiences. When something ends, our mind rushes to categorize it. That was a loss, that was a failure, that was unfair. But what if we waited a while before putting these labels on it? What if we allowed the experience to simply exist without judgment until we could see beyond the immediate end? As the story of the Chinese farmer reminds us, we often don't really know what an experience means until we see how it unfolds in the larger fabric of our lives. Have you ever noticed how some of the best stories begin just as something comes to an end? Cinderella begins when she loses her parents. Frodo's journey begins when Bilbo leaves the Shire. Luke Skywalker sets off on his adventure when his family is killed. What these stories have in common is that the apparent end is only the invitation to a greater journey. It's almost as if the universe needed to create a void so that something new could be born, as if it needed to open a crack in normal life so that the extraordinary could enter. One of the most transformative discoveries we can make is to realize the difference between the end of something specific and the end of everything. When a relationship ends, for example, it's not the end of love in our lives, it's the end of a specific expression of love. When a job ends, it's not the end of our ability to contribute, it's the end of a specific form of contribution. Confusing the specific with the whole is like believing that the sun has ceased to exist just because night has come. The sun is still there, it's just not visible from where we are now. Mourning an end is necessary and important. It's the process by which we honor what was, recognize its importance, and gradually open up to what can be. But sometimes we get stuck in mourning, as if keeping it alive is the only way to keep the memory of what we've lost alive. It's as if we remain sitting in the same chair, looking at the door through which someone left, refusing to look at the windows that open around us. Mourning has its time and its purpose, but it's not meant to be a permanent home. A powerful question we can ask ourselves when something ends is, what hasn't ended yet? When a job comes to an end, your skills are not finished, your experience is not finished, your network of contacts is not finished. When a relationship ends, your ability to connect, to love, to grow is not over. It's like a garden in winter. Everything seems to have died, but under the surface there are living roots, there are dormant seeds, there is a whole life waiting for the right moment to manifest itself again. Transitions are rarely clean and organized. There are overlaps, there are returns, there are farewells that linger. It's like twilight, it's neither day nor night, but an in-between place, a moment when both coexist. When you're in that in-between place between one cycle ending and another beginning, it's natural to feel disorientated. Like a traveler arriving in a foreign country, we don't know the language, the customs, or the routes. But it is precisely this disorientation that opens us up to new perceptions, to new ways of being in the world. Ancient cultures understood the importance of rites of passage, ceremonies that marked the end of one phase and the beginning of another. The transition from childhood to adulthood, marriage, even the seasons were honored with specific rituals. These rites served to give form to the invisible, to make the process of transformation tangible. In our modern world, we have lost many of these rites, but we can still create our own markers to honor endings and celebrate beginnings. Perhaps it's an object that symbolizes the closed cycle, a farewell letter, or a small personal ritual that marks the transition. One of the most unexpected gifts that comes when something ends is the opportunity to rediscover parts of ourselves that we had left behind. Maybe that relationship that ended didn't give you room for creativity. Perhaps the job that came to an end didn't allow you to express certain talents. Like objects stored in the basement that we find again when we make a change, forgotten aspects of who we are can re-emerge in the spaces opened up by endings. It's as if each ending is an invitation to reunite with dormant parts of our very essence. There is a quality of attention that naturally emerges when something important comes to an end. Suddenly, we notice details that previously went unnoticed. The last day at work, the last moments in a house we've lived in for years, even the last days of a loved one's life. These moments carry an intensity, a clarity that we rarely experience in the normal flow of life. It's as if the end sharpens our senses, inviting us to be fully present. And perhaps this quality of presence is precisely what we need to take with us into the new cycle that is beginning. It's fascinating how often we only understand the meaning of something after it's over. It's like reading a book. It's only when we reach the last page that we can see how all the events, all the characters connect into a coherent narrative. While we're in the middle of the story, in the middle of the experience, everything can seem confusing with no clear direction. But when we reach the end, an understanding emerges that wasn't possible before. It's like climbing to the top of a mountain and looking down the path we've traveled. Only then do we see the pattern our steps have formed. What I'm inviting you to consider is not ignoring the pain of an end. It's not pretending there's no loss. It's something more subtle and at the same time, more transformative. It's the possibility that what you're experiencing as an end contains within it the seeds of a new beginning. It's the possibility that the same experience can be lived not just as something that is being taken away from you, but as something that is opening up space within you. It's like looking at the same glass and seeing not only that it's half empty, but also that it's half full. Both perceptions are true. What changes is where we place our attention. When we find ourselves in the middle of a transition, with one cycle ending and another yet to be defined, one of the most powerful practices is to simply notice where our attention usually lands. It's as if our mind has habitual tracks, paths that it follows automatically. For many of us, these automatic paths repeatedly lead us to the painful aspects of the end, what was lost, what could have been different, what will never come back. Just noticing this pattern without judgment already begins to open up space for new possibilities of perception. What would happen if, when you noticed your mind stuck on the painful aspects of an ending, you gently redirected your attention to a different question? Not to deny what hurts, but to expand the field of vision. Questions like, what is this ending teaching me about what I really value? What qualities have I developed in this cycle that is ending that I can take with me? What possibilities are now opening up that weren't available before? These are not questions to answer quickly, but to contemplate, to let them work on you. One practice that many find useful during transitions is to create some form of record, a diary, audio recordings, even a box of meaningful objects. Not to hold on to the past, but to honor it and integrate it into your story. When we record our experiences, even the painful ones, we are affirming that they have value, that they deserve to be recognized. And often, when we look back months or years later, we discover meanings that weren't visible in the heat of the moment. It's like reading a book a second time and noticing important details that went unnoticed the first time round. Have you ever noticed how certain stories seem to repeat themselves in your life? Maybe it's relationships that always end for the same reason, or jobs that end with the same pattern of frustration. These patterns are not coincidences. They are invitations to a deeper understanding. When a cycle ends, there is a precious opportunity to ask, what is it about this story that keeps repeating itself? What am I being invited to see or learn that I haven't realized yet? Often, it's only when something ends that we have the distance we need to see these broader patterns. The body carries its own wisdom about endings and beginnings. Have you ever felt that tension in your shoulders, that knot in your stomach, that heaviness in your chest that accompanies moments of transition? Our physical body responds to changes, losses, and endings, and it often knows what we need even before our mind does. Paying attention to these physical signals, Creating space to feel what is present without immediately trying to fix or resolve it can be a powerful way of navigating endings with more awareness, allowing the transition to happen not only in our external life, but also internally. There is an ancient practice, present in many spiritual traditions, that is especially valuable in times of transition: gratitude. Not superficial gratitude, not "I should be grateful because others have less" gratitude, but authentic gratitude for what has been experienced, for what has been learned, even for what has been lost. When we manage to find genuine gratitude for a cycle that is coming to an end, something changes in our relationship with that end. It's as if gratitude transforms the internal chemistry of the experience, allowing it to be integrated more fully into our story. One of the most counterintuitive, but potentially most liberating practices when something ends is to ask, what can I let go of with this ending? We often cling not only to what is ending, but also to stories about ourselves that no longer serve, to expectations that no longer make sense, to images that no longer reflect who we are becoming. Endings can be opportunities for a broader cleansing, not only of what is evidently ending, but also of other layers that are silently ready to be released. In times of transition, when one cycle ends and another is still forming, there is a natural temptation to quickly fill the void. It's uncomfortable to be in a state of not knowing, of vagueness. But just as the earth needs a period of rest between harvests, we also need these breaks between cycles. It is in the apparent emptiness that new directions often begin to form, like seeds germinating in the dark. Resisting the urge to immediately replace what has ended with something new can be one of the hardest and most nourishing practices during a transition. Have you ever noticed how, during periods of change, everything seems to intensify? Emotions run high, thoughts seem more chaotic, reactions can be disproportionate. It's as if the internal system is recalibrating, adjusting to the new reality. At such times, self-regulation practices become especially important. Whether it's a walk in nature, a few minutes of conscious breathing, or simply giving yourself permission to feel what's present without being overwhelmed by these emotions. It's like crossing turbulent waters. We need an anchor, something to keep us centered while the storm passes. One practice that many people discover naturally in times of transition is to look for similar stories, whether in books, films, or conversations with friends who have been through similar situations. There is something deeply comforting in knowing that we are not the first to navigate these waters, that others before us have found their way through the end of one cycle and the beginning of another. These shared stories not only connect us to a wider human experience, but can also offer clues, inspiration, possibilities that we might not have seen on our own. The challenge in any transition is not to avoid the pain of what is ending, but to integrate that experience in a way that allows us to move on more fully, not diminished. The wound analogy is useful here. When we are physically injured, healing doesn't erase what happened, but integrates the wound into the body in a way that allows life to continue. A scar is a memory, but it's not an open wound. In the same way, integrating an end doesn't mean forgetting or denying it, but allowing it to become part of our history without it continuing to be an active source of pain. Perhaps the most transformative practice in times of transition is to cultivate trust. Not necessarily that everything will work out exactly as we want, but that we have the internal and external resources to navigate whatever comes our way. It's confidence in our ability to adapt, in the resilience we may not even know we have until it's tested. It's the confidence that, just as nature wastes nothing, transforming fall into nourishment, death into life, so our most painful experiences can be transformed into something that nourishes our growth. It's the confidence that, in some way that we may not yet be able to see, we are part of a larger cycle where endings and beginnings are sides of the same coin. Reaching the end of something significant is like coming to the edge of a precipice. On one side, everything we know, the familiar terrain, however imperfect. On the other, the unknown, vast and without clear maps. It's natural to feel dizzy, to want to step back. But what happens when, even with fear, we take a step forwards? It's not that the fear disappears, it's that we discover that there is ground beyond what our eyes could see from the edge. It's that we discover that wings can spread when we allow ourselves to jump. There is a particular quality of courage that emerges when something comes to an end, not the courage to fight, but the courage to allow. To allow what needs to end to actually end. To allow the empty space to remain empty for as long as necessary. to allow new beginnings to emerge at their own pace, not at the pace that our fear or impatience would dictate. This silent courage is rarely celebrated, rarely recognized, but it is often what makes the difference between getting stuck in an ending or discovering the beginnings it contains. Let me tell you about a man I knew, a musician who lost the movement of 3 fingers on his left hand in an accident. For a guitarist, this could easily be seen as the end of a career, the end of a dream, the end of an identity. And for a while, that's how he lived, in mourning for what he had lost, for the music he could no longer make. But then something changed. Not his fingers, they remained still. What changed was his perception. He began to experiment with new ways of playing with the fingers that still worked. He developed techniques that nobody had explored before. Today, he hasn't just started playing again, he's created a unique style that other musicians now study and admire. The end of one way of playing became the beginning of another. There's an old story about a king who asks his wise men to create a ring with magical powers to calm him when he's sad and to remind him of impermanence when he's elated. The sages return with a simple silver ring with the words, "This too shall pass," engraved on it. This phrase contains profound wisdom about the nature of all endings and beginnings in our lives. The moments of joy, the moments of pain, the cycles that begin, the cycles that end, they all share this quality of impermanence. Recognizing this is not pessimism, it is a doorway to a deeper freedom, to a way of being present with what is, knowing that this too will change. Ancient Eastern traditions talk about a state of consciousness called beginner's mind, the ability to look at the familiar as if it were new, to approach situations without the weight of expectations or habitual patterns. When something important comes to an end in our lives, we are forced into a kind of beginner's mind. Old maps no longer fit, established routines are disrupted. Although this can be uncomfortable, it's also a rare opportunity to rediscover life without the automatic filters through which we normally perceive it. It's like when you travel to a foreign country and suddenly notice details, colors, smells, sounds that would have gone unnoticed at home. One of the most surprising discoveries we make when going through the end of an important cycle is that the qualities we most feared losing, security, belonging, purpose, joy, were not contained exclusively in what ended. It's like realizing that the light that illuminated a room didn't come from the bulb that broke, but from the sun that continues to shine. This realization doesn't diminish the value of what has ended, nor does it deny the pain of loss. But it reveals a broader truth, that those qualities essential to a fulfilling life have many sources, many expressions, many ways of manifesting. Have you ever noticed how some people seem to flourish after periods of great loss or change, while others seem to wane? The difference doesn't lie in what happened to them. Life doesn't distribute endings and beginnings perfectly fairly. The difference lies in the relationship they establish with these events. Those who manage to integrate endings as part of their story, without being defined solely by them, discover a surprising capacity for renewal. It's not that they don't feel pain, it's that the pain becomes just one part of a bigger story, not the whole story. There is a concept in psychology called post-traumatic growth. The idea that major crises or losses, although painful, can catalyze profound positive transformations. People who go through these processes often report a greater appreciation for life, more meaningful relationships, a sense of personal strength, new possibilities, and spiritual development. It's not that they long for the trauma or celebrate the loss. It's that they discover, sometimes with surprise, that what seemed like destruction also contained within it the seeds of a more authentic reconstruction, more in line with who they really are. If I could offer you just one thing to take with you through life's many transitions, it would be this: the realization that you are not just what ends, nor just what begins. You are the continuous thread that runs through all these cycles, that connects them, that gives them meaning. Like the ocean that remains ocean through all its waves, now calm, now stormy, now reflecting the sun, now covered in clouds, you too remain, vaster than any singular experience, more continuous than any specific cycle. Honor the endings, celebrate the beginnings, yes, but always remember that you are the consciousness that witnesses both, that contains them, that transcends them. What does it really mean to turn an end into a beginning? It's not just a question of forced optimism, of ignoring loss and moving on. It's a deeper, more honest process. It's allowing the end to be fully an end, with its mourning, its farewell, its closure. And then, when the time is ripe, it's realizing that that end has opened up a space where something new can be born, not as a replacement or denial of what has ended, but as a continuation of the great story of your life, which has always included both endings and beginnings. True hope is not the expectation that everything will work out, that there will be no more losses, no more endings. It's something more resilient, more profound. It's confidence in our ability to find meaning, connection, and beauty even through the cycles of loss and renewal that are part of every human life. It's the realization that although we can't control many of the endings we face, we do have a say in how we respond to them, how we integrate them, how we allow them to transform us. Finally, there is a quality that emerges naturally when we live through many cycles of endings and beginnings. Compassion. Compassion for ourselves, for our stumbles, for the moments when we resist the inevitable or cling to what was ready to go. And compassion for others, recognizing that they too are navigating their own transitions, perhaps struggling with their own endings, perhaps seeking their own new beginnings. In a world where we are all, in one way or another, learning to turn endings into beginnings, perhaps the greatest gift we can offer each other is precisely this shared understanding, this compassionate presence. I end this dialogue not with definitive answers or guaranteed formulas, but with an invitation to a way of being in the world that embraces both endings and beginnings as essential parts of the same dance. As the poet T.S. Eliot said, "In my end is my beginning." There is a wisdom there that goes beyond words, that can only be fully understood by living it. And perhaps this is the ultimate beauty of this whole journey, that every ending you transform into a beginning not only changes your external circumstance, but also transforms something within you, making you more able to dance with life's changes, more fluid in your movements between what ends and what begins, more confident in your ability to discover new beginnings even in the most challenging endings.